Wow, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's virtual event with Brookline Booksmith featuring David Duchovny for his book Truly Like Lightning in conversation with WBUR's Emiko Tamagawa. My name is Bree Tribuna and I am the Assistant Events Director at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Mass. If you're familiar with our store, welcome back. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're very happy to have all of you join our community this evening, and we appreciate your support of David and an independent bookstore through your purchase and attendance. The chat is open, so feel free to make use of that. Just remember to set your chat to all panelists and attendees so that you can talk to other people in the audience. Please do note that Brookline Booksmith has a strict policy against abusive behavior and language. So at our discretion, any attendee can be removed from an event for partaking in such behavior. So before we start the conversation off, I would like to take a moment to thank the Wilbur, who we absolutely love working with, and I personally can't wait until we can all work together in person again. And another big thank you goes out to WBUR for partnering with us for tonight's event. WBUR is one of Boston's amazing NPR affiliates. Our moderator for tonight, Emiko Tamagawa, is a longtime producer of arts and culture segments for WBUR and WBUR's show Here and Now, which I hope everybody knows about. She studied psychology and drama at Yale and Brandeis and toured colleges and high schools with her one-woman show about Japanese American internment before turning to radio. Now, before I say anything else, I want everyone to know that if I wasn't hosting tonight, I would be in the audience. David Duchovny has been a constant in my life since the X-Files first aired, and I was just a weird little kid obsessed with Bigfoot, werewolves, and aliens. Thankfully, there were a lot of other weird kids, and now we're all weird adults. And I firmly believe that David was a driving force behind making weird the new cool. And what's cooler than acting, directing, producing, being a New York Times bestselling author, and then releasing your fourth novel? Speaking of, Truly Like Lightning is the story of Bronson Powers, former Hollywood stuntman turned converted Mormon. He and his wives live an insular life homesteading in Joshua Tree until the 21st century comes knocking and threatens to take it all: their family, their land, and even their faith. Truly Like Lightning is a heartbreaking meditation on family, religion, sex, greed, human nature, and the vanishing environment of an ancient desert. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming David Duchovny, who will kick off our conversation with a short reading.
All right. I hope I did that correctly. I'm going to do a short reading, and it's from the almost at the very end of the book, so it'll be very confusing. But I thought I wanted to read this guy Robert Malouf, who's kind of the villain of the story, the rapacious capitalist villain, real estate guy. Whose greed has kind of set all the wheels in motion for the tragedy that happened. And this was one of the last things I wrote when I was writing the novel. He didn't really have this scene or this chapter when I first conceived it. And then as I was editing it, it just became apparent to me that he needed to say his piece. And this is what that is. And there's a couple curse words in it, so hold your ears if that makes you squeamish, and if not, don't hold your ears. So Maya, who works for him, and has also set all these dangerous wheels in motion with her own greed, but has now kind of seen the light, has been being dressed down by Malouf. He's firing her, and he's calling her all sorts of names. And she's, in the original version that I wrote, she just kind of took it silently and then left. And then all of a sudden I heard her say in my mind, parasite is what she calls him. And so that's where I'm going to pick it up here, where Maya has just said, parasite. Parasite? You call me a parasite? He rose from his chair ceremoniously, it seemed to her, slowly, inhaling to full height. Amazing. And what have you done, big shot? What have you made in your life, Miss Wharton? Huh? You did your little homework assignments and got a free pass into the white man's capitalist slipstream? Bravo. You got the random luck to be born in a country at a time in history when women, vaguely, comfortably ethnic women like you are put on second base and told they hit a double? Yay, everybody gets a trophy. You got that affirmative action. How's the view? What view, Maya asked. The view you have standing on my fucking shoulders. She had the urge to giggle. This change had come over him so suddenly, like a switch thrown, like a practical joke. Sure, she was expecting some kind of attack, but this harangue had come scattershot out of left field and turned so nasty and offensive so quickly that Maya found herself checking out a bit in mild shock and idly wondering what the feminine version of ad hominem was. Ad feminam? Her Latin had ended in 7th grade of Catholic school. And what did you make of your golden ticket? He continued, his voice rising, seething sarcasm. You made straight A's. Wow, congratulations, gold star, smiley face, good girl. You know what I made? I made myself. He pounded his chest with both cupped palms like a silverback gorilla. Again, Maya thought she might scoff aloud at the cliche of the gesture. If he weren't so serious and pissed off, he was looming over her now. Out of nothing, ex nihilo, I made all this. He spread his arms wide in an embrace of the room and its fabulous furnishings, the floor-length offices of Praetorian capital. But he might as well have been referring to the entire world outside his window. Santa Monica, America, Earth. Robert Maloof made it all. Maya felt nailed to her seat by this eruption, which was authentic and scary, the self-righteousness and spittle sparking out of Maloof. You think I'm a lowlife, a Vichy Republican, a mini Trump con artist, a malignant narcissist, a bald, ugly, toxic old man with a tan. Stop me if you've heard this one. Holy shit, you're right. Guilty, all of the above. He laughed as if the string of condemnations had made him lighter. What choice did I have? What did God give me? What? I'm not white like you. Not really, no. You think I don't know that half the motherfuckers who work for me call me Sirhan behind my back? Not sir, Sirhan, get it? The guy who shot Robert Kennedy, so fucking clever. Why aren't you laughing? Maya shook her head slightly. She might feel sorry for him, but he was in the way, feeling sorry for himself, blocking any genuine goodwill she might have, taking up all the light and air. The only pity he could feel was self-pity, and it was bottomless. He continued eviscerating both of them, turning himself inside out in a rage. I ain't pretty like you beautiful entitled bitch. I don't have a nice wet pussy to get me free dinners. I can't dance or sing or act or fight or hit a baseball or write books. I have no inheritance like your boy Bronson. God gave me shit, a shit hand. And I took it and I bluffed it into a royal flush, all by my fucking self. He pointed at the heavens. No money, no beauty, no talent, nothing. The Almighty gave me nothing. Maloof lowered his hand in his eyes in shame, it seemed, and sat back down. Maya thought he had exhausted himself, but he hadn't. He looked up and met her eyes, and in a much lower, softer voice, spoke with what could pass for religious conviction, except for one thing. He held up that ghost index finger. Maya imagined it extended upward. God gave me one thing, and he gave it to me bigly. He paused for effect. Can you see it? She wasn't sure what he was talking about. Could she see his finger? He's lost his finger in an accident. Could she see where his finger used to be, what it used to look like? He looked as proud as a little kid who'd stumped his mom with a riddle. She sure hoped he wasn't talking about his dick. It's hard to see, he said, still waiting for a guess from her. Maya tried to arrange her face into an expression that conveyed total lack of interest, but she was curious. She had no clue what he was about to say, and he knew it. Emptiness, he finally said, touching gingerly at the air before him like a blind man walking in an unfamiliar world. Like it was a tangible thing, the dark presence of an endless absence. Yes, need, I want, and my want is infinite. I want everything.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And one thing I have to say to everyone who's watching who has not read the book yet, by the time you get there, it's really earned, and it's you know, you go through it and you watch this guy operate throughout the book, or and then you're just transfixed by what he says. So but you'll get there. David Duchovny, I actually want to circle back to the beginning of the book, because
I hope so. It's very odd to read like the last 3 pages of the book.
But I was glued when I got there, but I actually want to, and I do want to go back to Maya at some point, but I actually want to start with Bronson, because when I started this book, I did something that I don't usually do, which is I immediately leapt to the acknowledgments, because I was like, where the heck does this, I mean, there's this Bronson, this Mormon riding in the desert, and he has this particular brand of Mormonism, but where did this come from? So I went to the afterword, and then there are two things that sort of leapt out at me. One is that it was partly the writings of a professor that you had when you were at graduate school at Yale, Harold Bloom, and his book, The American Religion. And then the other connection that sort of like knocked me for a loop was the X-Files, and an episode you wrote for the X-Files.
Yeah.
So could you talk about that, like how that came to this book?
Sure. In 2000, I was, you know, I was able to like write and direct basically one X-File a year after the sixth year, because that's really all the time I could afford, you know, as an actor on that show. You know, it's just so busy that I could get time off and write one and direct one. So I had this idea that was kind of inspired by the case of a guy named Mark Hoffman, who I think, I might be calling this book, but I think Under the Banner of Heaven is about him. I'm not sure, but I don't know if it had been written at that point. I don't know how Mark Hoffman came to my attention, but he was a forger of Joseph Smith, basically. So of course, like any religious figure from the past, there's always going to be rumors of you know, clandestine and hidden artifacts, things like the Shroud of Turin, things like this. So, you know, Joseph Smith, not being that long ago, there are rumors of other writings of his that explain certain tenets that, in fact, you know, kind of contribute to like dark versions of Mormonism or fringe versions of Mormonism that are rumored to exist, but, you know, nobody has them. So what Mark Hoffman figured out, he became an expert forger. He would write these scandalous forgeries in Joseph Smith's hand perfectly. And then he knew that the church, the institutional church, would want to suppress these things. So he knew that they would pay a lot of money to him to buy these forgeries and then basically throw them away or put them in a vault somewhere. So he had this crazy gig going on like that. Eventually it all fell apart and he ended up actually killing a couple of people with a bomb. You know, that's his story. And for the X-Files, I kind of created this character instead of using Mormonism, which I really didn't know much about. I made the guy a forger of Christ's, almost like a Gnostic text. And the thing about Mark Hoffman is when he was writing in the hand of Joseph Smith, he said they weren't forgeries because he was channeling Joseph Smith. And so that's what I kind of used. You know, it intrigued me as an actor because we talk about becoming a character, so that when my Jesus Christ character or my hippie character was writing these Jesus Christ sermons, he thought that they were really Jesus's sermons. So I was using the whole kind of effect of, or the trope of an actor becoming a character, a forger becoming an authentic. And it led me into this area. I'm very interested in authenticity. You know, coming from Bloom, who writes about the anxiety of influence, how all of us in the 21st century now are so kind of weighted down by history, weighted down by all the brilliant people that have come before us. How are we to achieve our own brilliance? How, if not just in science, which obviously continues almost vertically, but how are we in the arts? How are we to contend with the geniuses that came before, if not to just go, oh, I read Shakespeare. Why would I write? What am I going to add to Shakespeare? So I started thinking about Mormonism as this American religion that kind of does away with this sense of belatedness, which says we are Latter-day Saints now. We're not looking back 2,000 years ago. Jesus came to America. Jesus was here, and we can become gods if we live a certain way. And it struck me as so quintessentially American, because I've always been fascinated by this idea of American exceptionalism that's kind of taken for granted in this country, that we are, you know, you hear it all the time, we are the best country. We are the best country that's ever been. Make America great again. And I don't think you get this in other countries. I haven't been around. I was in Canada when they were voting, and there wasn't shit like that. They weren't like make Canada great again. Canada's the best country in the world. It's really only in America that we do that. And there was something about the Mormon exceptionalism, the Mormon sense of we are not belated, we are in the correct time. We are now, and now is when miracles are happening. That struck me as if you had somebody like Bronson who feels late on the scene, feels like it's hard for him to have an authentic life, he would glom onto this religion that's telling him if he lives a certain way, he can be a miracle unto himself. He can be a saint. He can be a god. He can be an exceptional American. So that's how it started, very circuitously, to 20 years later, because here we are in 2021, right? So well, 19 years later, I wrote it, but it had been kind of just circulating in my mind. And then all the strands came together. And I'm sure that the Make America Great Again stuff was a catalyst as well. And this, what I feel is almost like a toxic American exceptionalism. I'm all for trying your best and trying to do good. But this idea that we are nothing if we're not the best, it seems to me very American as opposed to other countries' self-conception.
But, you know, the thing about Bronson is that he has his own particular type of Mormonism. It's like he's invented it for himself. But as the book progresses, it feels like he's struggling with what that faith is, you know, what, and so what were you trying to look at there? Like sort of the nature of faith, or?
I'm not a believer that way. I don't have that kind of faith. I believe, I guess I believe in spirituality, but I don't believe in like an institutional faith. And I think that, hey, I got to keep talking. Do you need me?
I was going to order.
Okay, just order me anything. Sorry. I believe, that's my son. I believe in food. So I promise I won't eat during this though. So with Bronson, yes, he does kind of create his own hodgepodge Mormonism in the desert, but it's almost as if it's the ground beneath his feet, he would say. I envy people that have strong faith in many ways. I envy the idea of really believing that there's a bedrock of not just morality, but of a spiritual truth that exists always for me, no matter what happens. No, you know, that exists outside of culture and things that are happening today. And that was really what I cued into with Bronson, was the desire for, you know, having gone through the last 4 years of not only Trump, but also like Me Too and Black Lives Matter and these huge cultural shifts. It felt like people want to feel like they got to find a place where the ground isn't shifting. And that was a very human kind of relatable desire. And for this guy, you know, and this happened to him 20 years ago, whatever. So he's been a Mormon for that long, but he was coming out of it. You know, he's had a bit of a drug problem and he was screwing around or whatever. And he didn't have bedrock. And when he found Joseph Smith, he found that. And that, I'm envious of that, you know, and I was like, I want to write from inside that guy. Not that I'm ever going to be that guy. I mean, I'll play him if we do the TV show, but
I was wondering about that, actually.
Oh no, that's what I plan to do. But I was fascinated by that. Well, I shared the need for the bedrock, but I was fascinated by the kind of consciousness that could actually embrace it, you know.
Well, it's interesting because now that I'm listening to that, I'm thinking about having him set against Maloof, who actually doesn't. He has what you just finished saying. He has emptiness. It's like, and that his entire life is trying to fill it. It's sort of like they're very much set in opposition.
Well,
So,
yeah, I mean, that they are two sides of the coin. I mean, Maloof is rapacious capitalism. He is just winning. He is just, that's all. Life is a zero-sum game, and it means nothing except that I'm winning. And Bronson is winning doesn't matter. It's all about living the right way, adhering to the correct principles, and transforming into a god. And what Maya comes to realize at the end, and she's somewhat seduced by Bronson during the story, because he seems so different to her from any of the men or any of the people that she's been around. And in that chapter, she realizes that on the one end, you've got Maloof, who, if I were to read further, he says, yeah, I am a parasite. Fuck yeah, I'm a parasite. I'm proud of it. All I do is eat and feed. You do all the work. And I just suck the blood right out. Why is that? Why is that a bad thing? I'm smart. And Bronson is more of a, you know, like an apex predator, but they're both apex. Even he's apex on the bottom. You know, when you think about what a parasite does, it's genius. They do nothing, but you do everything, and they just hang on to you, and they get what they need. And then on the other level, you know, an apex predator is, you know, obviously a hunter, and you know, in our minds, way more majestic and heroic. But what Maloof is saying in that chapter is, I'm heroic too, you know. And what Maya is realizing is that both of those men have a one-dimensionality to them that is powerful. You know, on the one hand, it's faith in the Mormon God, and on the other hand, it's faith in capital.
but you also, in addition to Maya, who sort of seems caught between these worlds, you also have a few of Bronson's children who sort of, they start out in his world, but then they, through all your various plot things, end up being raised in, all of a sudden, in civilization. Two of them go to high school. What are you trying to say with their journeys?
Well, I never know what I'm trying to say, you know. That's the fun of it, right? You're trying to, it's like making shadows, you know. You don't want to say anything in particular, but if I'm forced to talk about it, which I am, and I'm glad to, I wanted to see, I was fascinated. Like I was like, whoa, we're going to take these kids who have never seen another human being, and we're going to put them in Rancho Cucamonga, which is a fun word to say. And we're going to give them cell phones, and we're going to give them pizza, and we're going to give them Michael Jackson, and we're going to give them all the things. What happens when you take a 19th century person and put them in the 21st century? Now, Bronson had raised these kids. It wasn't like they weren't educated. They were educated beautifully. And Bronson and his wives had in their minds that they would make these revolutionaries. They would make these kids, they would prepare them outside of that world in order to go into that world and make it a better world. So that was always kind of the master plan, was we're not going to keep these kids away forever, but we're going to, you know, hothouse flower them and fill them with the best thought and the best that man has thought and woman has thought for all eternity, and then put them out there, and then they will become leaders. And I just thought it was an interesting and fun, like the middle part of the book, which is the longest part of the book, is Rancho Cucamonga. And as we think about doing the show, as I work with my collaborators, you know, that's when it almost becomes a comedy. You know, it's like this Greek and biblical tragedy on either ends of a fish out of water, three fishes out of water comedy. And I also enjoy that. I enjoy flexing tone of storytelling. I enjoy it as an actor. I enjoy it as a writer.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that. I mean, is there a difference in approach, or is it just sort of using your imagination in a slightly different way, you know, when you're writing as opposed to acting? Or, I mean, it sounds like it's all just fun too.
Well, it's all, I mean, what I like to say is it's all empathy, you know, it's all casting your, you know, we're all trapped in our bony skulls here, and acting or writing or most creative arts are actively trying to figure out what the other guy, what the other girl feels, you know, to put myself in the shoes of some other person, and what would that be like? So, you know, fun, it is fun, you know, but it's also, you also want to not so much respect, but you want to get it right, you know, and you want to make sure that you're truthful. And for me, it's always about the human truth. It's rarely about like the truth of woman, the truth of man, the truth of this color or that color. It's the human truth that I feel like I'm getting at. That's my goal, because I'm not an expert on those other things, but I feel like I have access to some human truth, and I want to share that through different sexes, through different colors, through different religions, through different everything.
About 2017, you sort of did less acting and more writing. Was that, you know, did that sort of, I mean, did you still change? I mean, did that change your outlook? I mean, did it narrow, did it sort of widen your focus to approach things?
Well, I think what happened was I had gone through like 2 years from 2015 to 2017. I had been doing both Aquarius and XFiles. We did 2 different reboots, and I did 2 seasons of Aquarius. And I hadn't wanted to work that hard as an actor. I mean, I hadn't wanted, you know, since the XFiles, I haven't wanted to work 10, 11 months out of the year as an actor. I've just gotten older, for one thing, but also I didn't have to, and I didn't want to. I wanted to pursue other things. So I got a little burnt out at 2017, stepped away and started to think, okay, the next thing I'm going to do, it's not going to be 25 episodes a year. I'm either going to direct something that I write, or I'm going to develop a show and act in it, or direct it, or run it, or whatever. So then I started to look at different shows to develop, and I wasn't able. I mean, I got a couple that were close, I guess, but for whatever reason, the marketplace did not bite at a couple, 3 things that I had developed in that time. So there wasn't a conscious decision for me to go, okay, I'm not going to act as much right now. It was more like, well, I did turn stuff down that I didn't necessarily think was the best thing that I wanted to do. I also, you know, if that had come my way, I would have jumped at it, you know, but I was trying to find something that really resonated with me, and I didn't want to just work for work's sake. And as it turns, and then the pandemic hit, so it was like, oh shit! And like now, all of a sudden, it's 2 years or a year that I didn't work, you know.
So how has the pandemic been for you?
Well,
I mean, you're releasing a book at the same time. Is it odd?
well, what's odd is as I was pitching this book as a show, one of my agents would keep on saying, like, to set it up, he'd say, you know, David wrote this book before the pandemic, but it kind of taps into this idea that we're all experiencing right now, which is like, how do we get away from the contagion? How do we take our family and our kids away? You know, in David's book, it's not the contagion of a virus, it's the contagion of culture. How do we protect our children? And I thought, oh, well, that's really smart. I wish I'd thought of that. And that's true. So in some way, I'm not saying that I predicted, you know, in anywhere, or that I was cluing into the zeitgeist or whatever, but it was, for me, it was, how do we protect our children from this onslaught of information and access. And that was part of it. And then the pandemic hit, and I had finished the book, and I sat down with my agent, and he was like, I want to wait till today, last week, Tuesday, to publish it, because we can't, I finished it fast. I finished it quicker than was expected. And I was like, let's get it out, because I'm always, I just want to get it out and move on to the next thing. And he was like, well, now we're running up to the election. Nobody's going to read for the 4 months before the election. So now, we can't get it out, and there's, physically we can't get it out in time, before the election, and then the election's happening, we don't want to. So it was like 9-10 months in the future. And I was like, damn, I'm, whatever. But then the pandemic hit, and, it doesn't, I got COVID, and, obviously I survived, and it wasn't that bad for me, but it's been it's been an experience to, I saw my son come in. We've been together a long time, for most of the time, almost a year. And, honestly, I wouldn't trade that for the world. It's the suffering of this pandemic is horrible, and it was handled horribly. But personally, the silver lining for me was that I had to stay close to my son, close for almost a year. And, I would never want to trade that for anything.
Just want to go to something completely prosaic, because you keep mentioning a show version of this book, which I have to say, when I was reading it, I was wondering, I could see you as Bronson, like, through this. Mm-hmm. And do you think that as you adapt a TV show, you'll sort of find yourself taking the story in a different direction than perhaps the book?
That's my hope. I don't want to personally adapt this book myself. I have partners and collaborators, and I want them to bring their sensibilities to the story, because I have no interest in kind of a literal translation of this book and throwing it up on the screen, because a screen has different demands than a book. And I feel like, well, yeah, I could probably edit this book, and I could go through it another 3 months and tighten up this and tighten up that, but I'm fine with it being the final product here, warts and all, whatever. I did the best I could do. I'm proud of it. I think it's really, really good. So I'm okay with it being out there. But that's what that is. Now the TV show, or the series of it, is something completely different. The brute fact that after the first year, it's all unknown territory. The first year of this show will be basically the book. After that, our hopes are that people fall in love with the milieu and the characters, and they'll be invested, and then we get to go a couple, 3, 4 more years and tell new stories about these characters. So I wanted fresh eyes on it. And I can always say, no, that's not right. It's not like I'm just going to throw up my hands and say I'm not going to be involved at all in the writing of it. I will be. But I love that collaborative aspect of somebody coming in and looking at something, even something that I did, and seeing something that I didn't see. And I'm like, wow, like you just said, or like my agent said when he said about the pandemic and like the desire to go away and protect your family. I was like, I didn't see that. So that's the kind of thing that happens when you collaborate.
Right. Other people have things that you may have not have seen, even in your own work. Because it was in your introduction, I also have to ask you, because I know that there are probably other X-Files geeks somewhere out there, and I was one of them, I have to admit. Do you ever, obviously this series will take up a lot of your time and energy. Do you ever see yourself going back to doing the X-Files?
I mean, I don't like to say no, because I don't believe no. It's like if people wanted to see it, and there was that kind of a demand, and if Chris Carter wanted to do it, if Jillian wanted to do it, if Darren Morgan, Glenn Morgan, and these people wanted to do it, that would be cool. I wouldn't say no, probably. I don't know. It depends on what I was doing at the time. If I was doing this, I might have to say no, but I love that show. I think that show is such a chameleon that it can exist, I think, in any time and can tell almost any story. So if you said, I don't know, I don't want to slag another show, but I there are other shows that are more rigid, and that if you were going to do a reboot, it would be a little more rigid. The X-Files to me is a completely fluid frame, and that's kind of the genius of what Chris did. So the X-Files of the future, I don't really know what those stories are. I don't know what it looks like. So I wouldn't say no, because it might be fabulous. I don't know.
I want to open up the questions, but I do want to sort of ask you the obvious one, which is there something you'd want people to take away from Truly Like Lightning?
I think that, what I've done here is I've written a character that's almost foreign to me, what I talk about, that faith, having that faith. And he does things that are very problematic in our current cultural climate. And what I'd want to take away from that is not a kind of a knee-jerk judgment of this person. What I wanted to do was write him from the inside out, write these people from the inside out. They're all each one of them are doing certain problematical things, certain things that might make you, in the dreaded words of Hollywood, unlikable. So I would want you to get to the end of this book and think, you know what, I probably would hate this guy if you described him to me. But now that I've been in his head for 450 pages, I'm ambivalent. I'd want ambivalence. I'd want empathy. That's kind of what I want us all to have empathy, even for the problematic people.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it actually is funny because even that last speech of Maloof, you start finding empathy there too. There are definitely traces of that. I want to get to some questions because people had a bunch of really great questions for you. So,
well, what's interesting, this is the first event that I've done where it's possible that people would have read the book, and that's always a different feeling. So I don't want to say, if you haven't read the book, don't ask me a question, but I look forward to it once people have read it, because then it's a different kind of a conversation.
Well, one of the questions that sort of leapt out at me was from Kathy Glinsky, because this is sort of what you were saying at what you were just talking about, saying, she was asking, was it difficult to present these characters without judgment, and their choices? Did it alter the way that you taught that you told the story?
Well, I mean, I created a character who does a couple of the most heinous things that human beings can do in our current conception of morality. The second one being, he seriously considers killing his own child. And yes, I wanted to make that person believable and understandable. And my point is that we are all living in let's say this is a predominantly Christian culture. We are coming out of Abraham and Isaac in the Old Testament, where we have the original story of a father who's called upon by God to sacrifice his son for no reason at all. This is an innocent. And then we have the iteration of that in Christ and God figures, where you have God the Father sacrificing, killing his own son, crucifying, torturing his own son. So there's something, deeply woven into our, if not our consciousness, our questioning, and there's so much about the patriarchy that's been going on for the last 4 years. And I thought, well, this is at the heart of it. There's fathers killing sons at the heart of our stories. And I wanted to kind of investigate that. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I'm not sure I even ever said that out loud. That's another thing that somebody collaborating with me might say,
I have a question from, I believe her name is Keely, or his name, sorry, Keely Portnow, asking did the story and the characters in the book turn out how you imagined they would when you started writing the story, or have they evolved since you began?
That's the fascinating thing, and happened more in this book than when I've written before, was at some point, probably because this book is long, at some point, the magical point, such a satisfying point for a writer, the characters start talking in their own voices to you, almost as if, it sounds like I'm a crazy person, but they'll sit on my shoulder and they'll say, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't say that. And I want to say this, and I want to go there. And all of a sudden I'm writing them over there and I'm just following. And yes, there were many surprises. I don't work from like note cards. I don't know. I have a vague and sometimes specific arc in mind. I knew the beginning and I knew something about the end, and I knew a lot about the middle, but I didn't know how I was going to get from there to there. And that's when the characters came in. For instance, I never knew how Bronson was going to get to that point where he was going to surrender 3 of his kids to go to Rancho Cucamonga. And that was always the sticky point for me. It was like, I don't believe it. I don't believe that this guy is going to give his kids up. And when I wrote the scene where Mary starts to worry about Pearl's relationship with Bronson, then I was like, oh, it's not Bronson's choice. It's Mary. It's Mary and Yalula who decide to get Pearl out of there. And I was like, oh, that's so much better than I ever thought. I really thought that was going to be the weakest point of this book that I was going to have to distract people from, to get beyond, because I knew I had to get those kids to Rancho Cucamonga. And I just thought, okay, Bronson's going to have to do it. And then it was clear to me that he would never do that. And then when I got Mary and Yalula involved, and it was like, yes, that makes total sense. And that came out of nowhere.
Carmelo Germano was asking, are there any nuggets from your life that found their way into Truly Like Lightning?
Oh, no. I don't think so. Specifically, it's very different. Certainly writing this in the age of, during Trump's presidency, there was a certain kind, like in the middle section, I did have fun kind of trying to understand what somebody who had no experience with this culture, how they would respond. And in that way, when I list what Pearl's into when she's learning about the culture, it's probably what I'm into too. Like I'm going to say, oh, Pearl loved The Sopranos, or, didn't like, I don't want to say, but, it's probably ventriloquizing from what I like there. But also just the concern over how to raise your children in this day and age. That completely informs the whole book, and it informs me, how much to protect them, how little to protect them, what to expose them to, what to shield them from, the questions that every parent must ask and does ask probably.
I just want to depart and just sort of follow up on that, because it seems like your character, like Bronson and his 2 wives, Yalula and Mary, you see different points of view on parenting. It seems to have given you an opportunity to look at parenting in several different ways.
Yeah, for sure. It's the idea of, it's like a vaccination. I mean, to draw that comparison, it's like how much of this, I was going to say dirt. It's not really dirt, but how much of this crap do you give these kids in order to inoculate them against the worst crap? You know, how do you do it? And I sound like an old fuddy-duddy because of that. And I've thought about it, and every step of the way, if you think about it in culture, look, every generation, most generations have to deal with some leap in technology that's going to force them to confront how do they protect their children. Let's go back to the printing press. Like, that ruined the Catholic Church, because all of a sudden Martin Luther says, here's a Bible for your house. You don't need that priest for that Bible. You can have a relationship with the Word and with God yourself. Mind-blowing, revolutionary, changes the world. There were perfectly rational people that would say, oh my God, the printing press is the end of the world. Don't let it happen. That's horrible. You know, the priests should be the ones with the books. Like, let them have it. We shouldn't all be literate. That's a bad idea. And then in the 19th century, you had the novel, which had heroes who were everyday people. Before that, heroes were gods, and they were Ulysses, and they were Homeric, and they were knights, and they were great people. And all of a sudden you had Tom Jones and Oliver Twist and just regular folks. And there were people that said, this is horrible. We should have role models. We shouldn't aspire to these regular people. Those are the wrong kind of books to be made. And then when I was growing up, it was like, television is going to kill everybody. You got to read books. Like, books that were the enemy now became the savior, and television was the enemy. So I grow up and I become a parent, and now the phone is the enemy. And I'm saying to my kid, get off that phone and watch a TV show, you know, or like, it's just, it's constantly driven by technology and access. And I have to believe that the parent's job is to somehow prepare the child to live successfully in the technological wisdom world that they're going out into. And I certainly don't have the answers to that, but it's something that I think about.
Your books. We have another question. Dial Finney was asking if you ever read anything that made you think differently about fiction.
Oh.
Just thought I'd throw something a little different.
Yeah, that's so hard. I mean, I wish something was jumping to my mind, but and I'm sure the answer is yes, but I'm not coming up with anything right now. I mean, there's so many different styles of you know, fiction that I've read in my life, and great practitioners of it will blow me away. But you know, Dickens would be one, you know, that I would be just like so plot hungry. Like, what happens next? God damn it. And it wasn't about the language. It wasn't about description. It was about what happens next. And then you go to the other side of the spectrum. You have somebody like Pynchon, which is like, I don't know what has anything happened. And so, yeah, they all open up different states of mind to get to.
Are there authors that you feel have shaped the way you write?
You know, I'm a fool if I give away that. But I would say, you know, I'm afraid. I really love Philip Roth. I think he's a terrific writer of the interior landscape, and I think, you know, I want to compete with him. I was having a discussion just yesterday or the other day. We were talking about Emerson and how he advances an argument kind of like not in a linear way, and like aphoristically, like he's constantly trying to rephrase the idea instead of like marching the argument forward step by step. And sometimes when I look at my writing, I see that I'm constantly trying to shadow what I'm trying to say, and I'll take different stabs at it. And I'm not the kind of writer that goes back and then edits it in such a way that I end with just the last one that I felt was the best one. But it's almost like, it's like shooting an arrow, missing, but it makes a shape that I'm trying to describe.
So how much rewriting do you do? I mean, do you sometimes?
I don't know how much other people do, so I don't know. I mean, I write fast when I'm in it, when I've got the spirit in me. You know, when I'm going fast, and I'm just riding it out because I don't know when it's going to leave. You know, so because I believe that there's like an inspiration that is germane to a work, and it's not like I could go, yeah, I'm going to take off a month. When I start, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna finish, and I'll probably finish pretty fast. And then, you know, editing, I'll edit forever. I would still be editing. I mean, I've got changes for the paperback. So I've made mistakes. I made one terrible mistake in this book, and I'll change that for a paperback. You know, it's like a literal mistake that somebody pointed out. And I was like, oh shit, that's bad. You know, it's not deadly. It's just a factual mistake, or it's more a geographical mistake, let's say. But you know, I'll edit forever. I edited just now when I read to you. I changed it.
Right,
I was like,
reading along.
Yeah.
So if you're deeply involved in making this book into a TV series, are you also sort of have in your mind what your next book might be, or do you just sort of wait for that to come to you?
I have some ideas. I just wrote a short story that I sold, that I'm selling. So I'm pretty proud of that because I've never written a short story, and it's really a pandemic short story. It's more like a novella, I guess. And so that came out. That just came out quickly, like the last month or so. So I'm happy because I hadn't written in a while, and I hadn't. It's hard to start another book while one is still in the shoot. I know that there are professional writers that always move on right away, and I know that Trollope, like if Trollope used to get up early in the morning to write because he had a job, and if he finished a novel in the midst of his writing hours, he would just start a new one, like on that day. But I'm no Trollope.
Well, you know, we had a question from Melanie Thomas. Have you ever considered writing poetry or a memoir?
I've written poetry when I was younger, in high school and college. I have poems in a drawer right here. That's me shutting the drawer. And I think they're okay. I mean, I wouldn't mind publishing a book of poetry. I think it'd be, or lyrics. Sometimes I think, oh, I'd like to publish poems and lyrics. But memoir, probably not, just because I'm super private, and you know, I would want to find a way to tell the stories that I think are instructive or entertaining in a way that wasn't, you know, the actual names and stuff like that, because I just get an icky feeling about that stuff. I'm kind of I kind of feel like that stuff is sacred, like one's personal life. And then, you know, if there are lessons to be learned, and if there is value to be imparted from one's personal life, and you don't have access to anything other than a memoir, I think that's okay. But I feel like I have access to other modes of expression, and I would go to those first before a memoir.
So do you feel like you are able to express yourself fully through fiction as well, just sort of where your brain is at, as opposed to having to write a memoir?
I mean, to me, a memoir is like, it's fun stories, you know, because like it's stories that I would tell my friends, you know. I work with this guy, I work with that guy, this happened and that happened. And I love those stories, and I love that I've had a full and rich career in which I've crossed paths with people that people are interested in, and I could write that memoir, but in a way that, you know, unless you took away everything I had and you said, David, you've got to start from scratch. You're homeless. Your kids can't eat, but we're gonna you know, give you this advance for your memoir. Then I'd say, fuck yeah, let's write a memoir. But other than that, maybe not.
So other than making this book into a TV show and the paperback, what's next for you?
I've just done a couple of acting jobs. I'm leaving tomorrow to go do a movie in London. So I'm doing some acting right now, and then I hope to come back from London and really dig into the Truly Like Lightning, the series.
Cool. Do you think you'll ever be able, like, once you approach Bronson as an actor, is he just going to be with you always? I mean, is this like one of those characters that will stay?
He'll be with me always anyway. I mean, you can't write a book and not have all those people stay with you, even the ones that you don't really like. Like, it's instructive to me what I said in the beginning was, like, Maloof didn't have this self-justifying monologue ever, you know, until he did, you know, and he did because he stayed in me, and he was like, hey buddy, you're giving me short shrift. I'm the hero. You just don't know it. And I was like, okay, let's see what you got to say.
It's wonderful when your characters can surprise you, isn't it?
It's really, that's like a miracle, you know. That's like, it's like in between insanity and magic and luck, and you know, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like it comes from some other place. And then you start to, it's like channeling, you know, it's like channeling a character, an idea, or a value, and that's what makes writing beautiful, but also very hard, because you have to remain very open to things that might be painful, and ideas and events that might be painful to you, and beliefs that you don't share, you know, beliefs that you do not share, and yet they have to come through certain characters, and can be scary sometimes, but you know, in the end, it's just fiction. It's not going to hurt anybody.
Well, we are so incredibly happy that you are open to all these possibilities, because that means that you write all these books and you have all the performances, and
Thank
Truly
you.
Truly Like Lightning is definitely one where you just sort of dive into the world and live there, and hopefully we can all develop some empathy. So
That'd be nice.
and I think it has hit 8 o'clock and we have kept you, but thank you so much, David Duchovny. It has
Thank
been
you.
a real honor and a pleasure to speak with you and to read the book.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who's been here. And I'm sorry I couldn't see you. It's, you know, just another pandemic thing where I sit in this room alone. You know, if you had a camera on me, it'd be like, that guy's talking to himself. That's a crazy person. And, you know, one of these days soon, we'll all get a chance to actually be human again.
I think.
That was amazing. Thank you both so much. And thank you for everyone who joins us in the audience. I hope that you all enjoy the book as much as I did. And I really look forward to seeing the TV show. I hope that happens.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.